This, of course, is all about being authentic at work today. We said it's not at work, but I'd just like to point out that for anybody under the age of 16, whatever, or 18, at work is, of course, being at school. So this story is for adults of all ages, but primarily for those where work is at school. And it's called Being True. It was not easy being a Christian at school. The other kids gave Jim a bit of a hard time, even though some were his mates. The bullies, and he could handle most of them, would sneer at him and call him a sissy and other less than complimentary terms. And then there were his mates, who'd have that reserve in their eyes when he'd tell them about the fun he'd had at youth club or the challenge in discussions with his family at lunch after church. Sometimes he wondered if it was all worth it, and on occasions he'd even meekly agree with those challenging him, just for a quiet life. Strangely, the bullies were the easiest to deal with. If you had the guts to stand up to them, they'd back off. However, being bullies, they tended to go around in a group for their own safety, because they were normally quite frightened to bully on their own. And of course, the one thing Jim wanted to do was to smack him in the face. But that kind of defeated the Christian thing, and so he'd take the insults and boil inside. The youth worker had once said that he wore a bracelet with WWJD, what would Jesus do, on it, and that would keep his mind focused for the best response. It still didn't stop Jim wanting to batter them until they gave him more respect. No, it was his non-Christian mates that were the worst and hardest to deal with. Normally, they'd have a laugh and mess about, but when anything to do with Christianity came up, no matter how slight, they'd back off quick time. It was as if it was a disease and they didn't want to catch it. That hurt more than anything, but Jim persevered and quietly kept his faith. He knew that in the world he was in a minority. Those around him found it much easier to run with a big pack and not to be different, to become absorbed by the latest thing that was trending, irrespective of whether it was right or not. The others thought he was weak and was being left behind, whereas, in reality, he had to be stronger to stand away from the crowd. And Jim was being noticed. At school, the teachers, even those who weren't Christian, recognized his strength, that he was prepared to stand up for what he believed in, even if it was difficult. In heaven, God smiled too, because whilst he might love all Jim's mates, and the bullies too, he had a special fondness for those who hung in with him. After all, hadn't he given Peter a very special role, hot-headed that he was, even now, and after he'd gone and denied Jesus 3 times? Yes, he'd made all these humans in his own image, but some were closer than others. And in church, Jim was noticed by the adults too. The older they got, the more they realized just how difficult it was for a teenager to hold to being a Christian, and Jim gave them inspiration to try harder in their own particular journeys. Jim might not know it, but by being true to his faith, he was influencing a lot of people. One day he'll find out. Until then, he's just got to keep going.